So the alarm goes off.
The worst sound.
Right. It is exactly 6:30 in the morning. And you're just lying there in the dark.
Totally, just staring at the ceiling.
Exactly. And that harsh digital blare is just echoing in your ears. So what do? You hit snooze.
Naturally. You just want 9 more minutes.
Yeah, just 9 more minutes. But then it rings again. And this time you feel this wave of, like, genuine frustration wash over you.
Because now you have to actually face the day.
Exactly. But the bed is warm,
Right.
And the room is cold.
Mm-hmm.
So you hit snooze one more time. But eventually the anxiety of being late just sort of outweighs the comfort of the blankets.
That is such a real feeling. The anxiety just finally takes over.
Yeah. So you drag yourself out from under the covers and you go to a job where you will spend the next, 8 hours making someone else richer.
Yeah. Building someone else's dream.
Right. And on the way, you grab a $9 coffee. And you know you probably shouldn't have bought it, but you buy it anyway because, well, you feel like you need some tiny reward just for showing up.
Oh, the justification coffee. We've all been there.
We have. And then you get to the office or, you log onto your remote portal and you just sit through endless meetings. Not meetings where things are actually decided, but meetings that only result in more work being piled onto your desk.
Meetings that could have been an email, basically.
Exactly. And by 4 p.m., you are checking the clock every 5 minutes. The weekend feels like miles away.
It's exhausting. It's a grind.
It really is. You know there has to be more to life, but you are utterly exhausted by the time you get home. You want financial freedom, but somehow your expenses miraculously rise right alongside your income.
It's the classic trap.
It is. You, my friend listening to this, are caught in the rat race. And I think the hardest part is just the sheer paralysis you feel when you look at the mountain of advice out there on how to escape it.
Oh, yeah. That morning routine you just outlined, that is the precise reality for a vast majority of the population.
It's crazy how universal it is.
It really is. I mean, people are essentially trading the highest energy hours of their day and honestly the best years of their lives for a system that actively drains them.
Yeah.
We are talking about an existence defined by friction. Like, every single step forward requires immense effort, but the scenery never actually changes.
Right. And it's not a lack of desire, is it? People want to build things. They want to be creative. They want to connect.
Absolutely. They have ambition.
Yeah. But there is this massive disconnect between the desire to escape and the actual mechanics of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we are going to explore a very specific set of ideas from some incredible sources.
And we're going to keep it focused.
Exactly. We aren't going to look at specific authors or name-drop gurus. We are looking purely at the core mechanics of human behavior, creativity, productivity, wealth, and connection.
Because that's where the real answers are.
Right. I want to figure out why we are stuck and, more importantly, how the underlying wiring of our brains can actually be used to get us unstuck.
Well, I think the place to start is understanding why that 6:30 a.m. alarm feels so universally punishing, even for people who, seemingly have a good life.
Yeah, because some people have great jobs and they still hate mornings. Why is that?
There is a psychological phenomenon we need to look at called hedonic adaptation. This is the invisible engine driving that morning frustration.
Hedonic adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay. Break that down for us.
So human beings possess a baseline level of happiness, and our brains are neurologically wired to return to that baseline pretty much no matter what happens to us.
Wait, really? No matter what happens?
Yeah. Think of it less like a treadmill, which is the usual cliche people use, and more like a deeply embedded neurological thermostat.
Oh, a thermostat. Okay.
Well-
So if the temperature drops, the heater kicks on, and if it gets too hot, the AC kicks in to bring it back down to, say, 72 degrees.
Exactly. Now let's apply that to our desires. You think to yourself, if I just get that promotion or if I buy that brand new car, I will finally be happy.
Right, the I'll be happy when trap.
Precisely. So you push yourself, you secure the loan, you buy the car. For the first 2 weeks, every single time you sit in that leather seat, your brain gets a massive spike of dopamine.
Yeah, the temperature in the room goes up to 85 degrees.
Yes. But your brain's thermostat immediately recognizes this anomaly. It says, whoa, too hot.
Oh, wow. So it actively fights the happiness.
In a way, yes. It starts downregulating your dopamine receptors. Very quickly you adapt. That new car smell fades, the thrill wears off, and it just becomes your regular mode of transportation.
The temperature returns to 72 degrees.
Exactly. But here's the insidious part. Your brain now requires more stimulus just to feel a slight bump in temperature.
Oh, no.
Yeah, to sustain any elevated feeling, you suddenly require newer things, better things, more expensive things.
So that $9 coffee I mentioned earlier, that is just a tiny, pathetic attempt to spike the thermostat on a Tuesday morning?
That's exactly what it is. It's a micro spike.
But wait, if human beings are biologically wired to constantly adapt and constantly want more, like if our dopamine receptors literally force us to raise our lifestyle expectations, isn't the rat race just inescapable human nature?
That's a very common conclusion to jump to.
I mean, are we just arguing against our own biology here?
It is a biological default, yes, but it is not an inescapable prison. The hedonic thermostat functions on autopilot only if you allow your environment to dictate your internal state.
Okay, so it's about what we let control us.
Right. You are operating in a state of high friction right now, where you are constantly burning energy to manipulate your external world.
Yeah.
Buying things, seeking promotions, just to change how you feel internally.
Trying to fix the inside by changing the outside.
Exactly. Escaping the cycle requires flipping that dynamic. You have to change the internal architecture first.
And how do we do that? What's the foundation?
The absolute foundational shift required to do this is moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Oh, okay. We hear those terms thrown around constantly, though, like in every corporate seminar.
It's true, it has become a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a bumper sticker at this point. Just have a growth mindset.
Right.
But what is actually happening in the brain when someone is stuck in a fixed mindset?
That is the right question, because it is not just a motivational platitude. In a fixed mindset, you subconsciously believe that your talents, your intelligence, and your core personality traits are entirely static.
Like, I am who I am, and I can change.
Exactly. You believe the hand you were dealt at birth is carved in stone. And because of this deeply held belief, your ego becomes incredibly fragile.
Fragile how?
Well, every challenge, every new project, every attempt to change your routine is perceived by the brain not as an opportunity, but as a severe existential threat.
Ah, because if everything is static, then failing at a new task means that I personally am a failure. It's a permanent indictment of my identity.
Yes, that's exactly it. Your amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for processing fear and threat detection, it cannot distinguish between a physical predator in the wild and the social threat of looking incompetent in a meeting.
Wait, really? It reacts the same way to a tiger as it does to a bad PowerPoint presentation.
Pretty much. If you try to learn a new skill and you stumble, the fixed mindset interprets that as proof of your inherent inadequacy. So your brain actively sabotages you to protect you from that pain. It generates fear.
That is wild. And the texts we are looking at break this fear down. It isn't just a general anxiety. It is a complex, multi-layered web that's holding you in place.
It has very distinct components.
Right, like you have the fear of loss. You think, what if I try to change careers and I lose a little security I actually have?
And then there's the confusion of stepping into the unknown, which is deeply disorienting for people.
Oh, absolutely. And the lack of competence, which we just touched on.
Yeah.
Like the absolute dread of being a beginner again and looking foolish.
Nobody wants to look stupid.
Nobody. Then there's the fear of extensive work because, let's face it, you are already so exhausted, the idea of adding more effort feels literally impossible.
And lastly, there's the absolute terror of losing control.
Yeah, that terror of losing control is huge. The sources say it's often the strongest anchor. People will choose a familiar misery over an unknown success every single time.
They absolutely will.
Like, you may hate your 9-to-5 job, you may hate the commute and the pointless meetings, but you know the rules of that specific game. You know exactly how to survive in that misery.
Exactly. Stepping outside of it means relinquishing that control.
It makes me think of an open-world video game.
Oh, I like this. How so?
Well, imagine you buy this massive, beautifully rendered game. It's got dragons and forests and entire continents to explore.
Right, a huge adventure.
But you log in, and you just stay in the starting village.
Just wandering around the safe zone.
Yeah. You walk around the same 3 houses, you talk to the same 3 villagers, performing the same minor tasks over and over.
Gathering wood or whatever.
Exactly. And why? Because you notice that outside the village gates, there are monsters. And if you go out there, you might lose some of your digital health points.
Right, you might take damage.
So you refuse to leave. You preserve your health points perfectly. But you entirely miss the actual adventure. You miss the whole point of the game just to protect an artificial sense of security.
That video game analogy maps perfectly onto how our brains handle social and professional risk. You are hoarding resources for a battle you refuse to fight.
Hoarding resources, wow.
And the tragic irony is that by staying in the starting village, people engage in massive subconscious self-sabotage.
Wait, how so? If they are staying safe, aren't they avoiding sabotage?
No, because staying safe allows them to protect their ego with the illusion of potential.
The illusion of potential. Okay, what does that mean?
It is much easier on the psyche to say, I could have written a best-selling novel, or I could have started a massively successful business if only I had the time, if only I didn't have this demanding job.
Oh, I see. As long as you never actually try,
Yeah.
that comforting narrative remains intact.
Exactly. Your potential remains theoretically infinite. But the moment you sit down to write the novel or start the business, you risk shattering that illusion.
You risk discovering that maybe you aren't a genius.
Precisely. And to avoid that devastating realization, your subconscious will generate endless distractions.
This sounds way too familiar.
Right. You will suddenly find it absolutely imperative to clean your entire house, or scroll through hours of social media, or even pick fights with your partner. Anything to avoid the task and maintain the safe narrative of unfulfilled potential.
That is painfully recognizable. I've definitely rage cleaned my kitchen instead of working on a hard project.
You all have.
So the transition to a growth mindset isn't just about being more optimistic. It is about fundamentally rewriting that internal code so that the brain stops interpreting failure as a predator.
Yes.
How do we practically execute that? Like tomorrow morning.
You start by redefining the baseline. In a growth mindset, your current intelligence and skill level are merely the starting coordinates on a map. They are not the destination.
Just a spot on the map.
Exactly. The actionable step here is to completely detach your ego from the end result and attach it entirely to the process of incremental learning.
Okay, focus on the process.
If you attempt a new project today and you completely fail, but you extract one piece of data about why it failed, you have succeeded.
Right. You must train your brain to view criticism and failure simply as raw data.
It is not an attack on your identity. It is just a topographical map showing you where the obstacles are in that forest you just stepped into.
Okay, I am with you. We recognize the thermostat, we understand the amygdala is tricking us into staying in the starting village, and we commit to treating failure as data.
That's the foundation.
We've optimized the mindset. But here is the practical wall people hit. You can't escape your current routine using the exact same thinking that built it in the first place.
That is very true.
Like when you get home at 6 p.m., your brain is utterly fried from the fiction of the day. How do you force a tired brain to generate the creative, lateral ideas needed to actually change your life?
You cannot force it through sheer willpower.
Because you don't have any left.
Exactly. Willpower is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. Instead, you have to bypass the exhausted logical centers of your brain entirely.
Bypass logic.
Okay, how? The research we are examining highlights a concept rooted in Zen philosophy called the beginner's mind.
The beginner's mind.
It is the practice of approaching a problem, even a problem you have dealt with for a decade, with absolutely zero preconceptions.
That sounds great in theory, but, when you are looking at the same spreadsheet you've looked at for 5 years, your brain automatically loads all its preconceptions. You can't just wish them away.
True, which is why the sources suggest operationalizing this through an exercise where you adopt the persona of a Martian.
A Martian, like an alien.
Yes. Imagine you are an extraterrestrial who has just landed on Earth today.
Okay, taking notes.
You have no context for human society, corporate structures, or social norms. You sit at your desk and you look at your life. You have to ask why repeatedly about the most fundamental, invisible assumptions you make every day.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Why do I sit in a square room staring at a glowing rectangle? Why do I trade pieces of paper for housing? Why is this specific work process structured this way?
That forces you to strip away the default excuse of, because we've always done it this way.
Exactly.
If you ask a Martian why you are doing a manual data entry task that takes 3 hours, the Martian would say, why hasn't the glowing rectangle been programmed to do this instantly?
It exposes the absurdity of our routines.
It really does. But what if the Martian exercise isn't enough? What if the brain is so deeply entrenched in its rut that asking why just leads to more frustration? The texts get into some genuinely wild territory here regarding sensory disruption.
They do, and it is rooted in solid cognitive science. When you are stuck on a problem, your brain is relying on the prefrontal cortex to grind out a solution using familiar sequential data.
Right, it's a logical loop.
But lateral thinking, the kind of creativity that actually solves intractable problems, requires you to break that loop.
And one of the ways the texts suggest breaking it is the perfume technique. I read this and thought it was bizarre, but the more I think about it, the more fascinating it is.
It's a very unusual approach, but effective.
Yeah, you are supposed to gather a collection of vastly different, highly pungent scents. We were talking a bottle of vanilla extract, a stick of cinnamon, a bar of harsh industrial soap, maybe even something sharp like white spirit or bleach.
Yes, very distinct smells.
Then you blindfold yourself, you pick a scent entirely at random, you take a deep breath, and you ask your brain, what does this scent suggest about the problem I am trying to solve?
I know, it sounds absurd on the surface.
It really does. But let us look at the mechanics. Why would smelling soap help me solve a work problem?
Well, the olfactory nerve is the only sensory pathway that bypasses the thalamus and connects directly to the amygdala and the hippocampus.
Okay, and those are...
The areas of the brain involved in emotion and memory. When you introduce a powerful, unexpected sensory input like a random smell, or, as another technique suggests, staring at abstract ink blots or listening to randomized noise, you cause a massive disruption in your logical grinding.
like throwing a wrench into the gears.
Exactly. Your brain is essentially a pattern recognition machine. It hates unresolved data.
So it tries to fix it.
Yes. When faced with an unrelated smell while holding a specific problem in working memory, the brain will frantically try to bridge the gap. It will start firing off obscure associations and long dormant memories to make sense of the collision between the scent and the problem.
Oh, wow. You are tricking your subconscious into doing the creative heavy lifting.
Precisely.
Okay, I'm going to push back hard on this.
Please do.
If I am sitting at my kitchen table, my credit card is maxed out, and I am stressed out of my mind about paying rent next week, how exactly is smelling a cinnamon stick or looking at an ink blot going to help me find the money?
That is a very valid critique.
Right, it feels a little frivolous when the stakes are really high.
And the answer is that the cinnamon stick does not magically print money.
Shame.
But consider what happens to your brain when you are in a state of acute financial panic. The perceived threat triggers a fight-or-flight response. Cortisol floods your system.
Yeah, you just freeze up.
When this happens, your cognitive focus narrows drastically. It is an evolutionary mechanism designed to keep you focused on the tiger in the bushes, not on the beautiful sunset.
So you get tunnel vision.
In the modern world, this translates to tunnel vision. You keep cycling through the exact same 3 impossible solutions to your rent problem, over and over, building up massive friction.
You literally lose access to the wider creative parts of your brain because the alarms are blaring.
Exactly. What the sensory disruption does is force a neurological reset. The bizarre input of the smell breaks the state of panic just long enough to shatter the tunnel vision.
Ah, I see.
Breaking those rigid thought patterns is the absolute prerequisite for practical problem solving.
It shakes you out of the panic.
It might shift your brain state just enough to allow a new connection to form. Maybe you remember a forgotten asset you could sell, or a contact you haven't reached out to, or a skill you can monetize immediately. It isn't about the cinnamon. It is about rebooting the hardware.
You are Creshrel alt-deleting the panic response. That makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
There is another technique here for bypassing our own limitations, and it is a psychological hack called the Board of Advisors.
This one is incredibly powerful.
The idea is that you mentally assemble a team of historical figures, fictional characters, or absolute experts in various fields.
Whoever inspires you.
Right. And when you hit a wall, you don't ask what you should do. You ask, how would Marie Curie analyze this data set? Or what would James Bond do in this high-stakes salary negotiation?
It is a brilliant workaround for the imposter syndrome we discussed earlier.
Because I might be terrified, but James Bond isn't.
Exactly. You may not possess the internal confidence to walk into a room and make a bold demand. Your identity is too tied up in fear. But you know precisely how a fictional spy with supreme confidence would handle it.
So you just wear their confidence for a minute.
By adopting that persona, you borrow their neurological posture. You step outside your own self-doubt.
That's a great phrase, neurological posture. And the texts also detail a somatic exercise to accompany this called the balancing act.
Yes, it involves physically standing up and using your environment.
Right, you place an imaginary list of incredibly wild, totally impossible ideas on your left side.
And on your right side.
On your right side, you place all your strict, realistic constraints, like the budget, the deadline, the actual physics of the problem.
Right.
And then you physically sway your body back and forth between the two sides, left to right.
You are engaging the motor cortex. Our cognition is deeply embodied.
So moving helps you think.
By physically moving your body between the space of unconstrained imagination and the space of rigid limitation, you force the brain to find a middle ground connection. You are literally embodying the search for a compromise.
It sounds a bit eccentric, to be honest.
It does look a little silly.
But hey, if you're stuck in a room alone, swaying back and forth is a small price to pay for a breakthrough.
Absolutely.
So let us assume we have done this. We disrupted the routine, we rebooted the brain, we consulted our imaginary James Bond, and we finally have a brilliant lateral idea.
We have the plan.
We know what we need to build or write or create to change our lives. Now we arrive at the execution phase. And this is where most people completely fall apart.
This is the real bottleneck.
Because the moment you sit down to do the actual work, the phone buzzes, an email notification pops up, and you are immediately sucked right back into the friction of the rat race.
This is the crux of modern professional failure. We live in an era of continuous partial attention.
Continuous partial attention.
We operate under the pervasive illusion of multitasking. You believe you are being highly productive because you are answering emails, listening to a podcast, and writing a critical report all at the same time.
Yeah, I'm doing 3 things at once. I'm super productive.
But the research is unequivocal. The human brain cannot parallel process cognitive tasks. What you are actually doing is rapid context switching.
And every time you switch from the report to the email and then back to the report, there is a delay.
It is worse than a delay. It leaves what researchers call attention residue.
Attention residue, what's that?
A portion of your cognitive processing power remains stuck on the email you just read, even after you return to the report.
Oh, man.
If you switch contexts 10 times in an hour, your brain becomes coated in this residue, severely degrading your cognitive performance.
Like trying to run with mud on your boots.
It becomes slower, less accurate, and drastically less creative. To execute on the ideas that will actually change your life, you have to understand the fundamental difference between shallow work and focused, intense work.
Let's define those because the lines get very blurry in a modern office. Shallow work is basically the logistical administrative stuff, right?
Yes. Shallow tasks are non-cognitive, highly replicable, and often performed while distracted.
Like what?
Replying to standard emails, filling out expense reports, attending status update meetings where you just listen. These are shallow. They do not create new value in the world. Anyone could be trained to do them.
Okay, and deep work.
Focused, intense work, on the other hand, requires undistracted concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limits.
The heavy lifting.
It is writing a complex algorithm, drafting a persuasive thesis, designing a new product. That is where real, irreplaceable value is generated.
I always think of shallow work like snacking on cheap junk food all day. You are constantly chewing, your jaw is tired, your mouth is always moving, but you are never actually nourished.
That's a brilliant way to look at it.
At the end of the day, you just feel bloated and exhausted, yet strangely empty. Focused work is clearing the table, turning off the phone, and sitting down to eat a high-quality, nutrient-dense steak dinner.
It takes more effort to digest.
But it sustains you. It actually builds muscle.
That is an apt comparison. Shallow work keeps you busy. Focused work keeps you moving forward.
But integrating that level of focus into a world designed to distract you is incredibly difficult.
It's the ultimate challenge.
The research synthesizes 4 distinct philosophies for achieving this focus. The listener must evaluate their own life constraints and choose the one that aligns with their reality. Let's go through them. The first is the monastic philosophy.
Monastic, as in a monk. This is the most extreme approach.
How extreme.
You eliminate all shallow obligations, you delete social media, you stop answering emails, you isolate yourself in a cabin or a closed office, and you spend your entire life doing nothing but deep, intense work.
Wow.
It produces incredible results, but it is entirely unrealistic for anyone with a modern corporate job or a family.
I cannot exactly walk into my boss's office tomorrow and announce that I am taking a monastic vow of silence and throwing my laptop into the ocean. I'd be fired by noon.
Which brings us to the second approach, the bimodal philosophy.
Bimodal. Okay.
This acknowledges that you have a regular life, but it requires you to split your time strictly. You divide your schedule into clearly defined blocks.
Like days of the week.
Exactly. For example, a university professor might teach classes, attend meetings, and answer emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, they are completely unreachable. They act like a monk on those specific days to do their heavy research.
That's still pretty tough for a standard 9-to-5 worker whose boss expects them on Slack all day.
True.
But I can see how a freelancer or a consultant could structure their contracts to allow for a bimodal life. What is the third option for the rest of us?
The third is the rhythmic philosophy. This is about removing the friction of decision-making by setting a rock-solid, unbreakable daily habit.
Rhythmic, like a heartbeat.
You don't wait for inspiration or a clear schedule. You carve out a specific time every single day.
So, like waking up early.
For most people, this means waking up at 5 a.m. and working from 5 to 7 a.m. before the house wakes up and the emails start arriving. You create a rhythm so ingrained that it becomes as automatic as brushing your teeth.
That seems like the most practical for the person trying to escape the rat race.
Yeah,
You build the escape pod 2 hours a day before you go to work.
exactly.
But what if your life is true chaos?
Yeah.
What if you have a newborn or you travel constantly and you literally do not have a guaranteed 2-hour block?
Then you must adopt the journalistic philosophy.
Journalistic.
This is the most advanced and cognitively demanding approach. Think of a wartime journalist who has to file a story while sitting in a noisy airport terminal with a 20-minute layover.
They can't exactly light a candle and put on focus music.
They do not have the luxury of waiting for the muse. They open the laptop and drop instantly into a state of deep concentration.
That sounds intense.
It is. If you train your brain, you can seize any free pocket of time, a canceled meeting, a commute, a delay at the doctor's office, and immediately execute intense work.
The journalistic approach is brutal, but it completely destroys the most common excuse people use, which is, I don't have a solid 4-hour block to write my screenplay, so I just won't write today.
It forces you to realize that 20 minutes of high-intensity focus is infinitely more valuable than 0 minutes.
Wow, yeah. And a massive component of making any of these 4 philosophies work is a concept one of the sources calls tackling the biggest task first.
This is critical. When you wake up, your pool of willpower and your cognitive energy are at their absolute peak.
You're fresh.
If you start your day by checking your email, scrolling through the news, and doing shallow administrative tasks, you are burning your highest quality energy on low-value output.
Spending your best dollars on cheap stuff.
By the time you finally get to the difficult, life-changing task, your brain is depleted. You must identify the single most difficult, most important task of your entire day, and you must execute it single-handedly before you do anything else.
This ties perfectly into the 80-20 rule, doesn't it? The idea that 80% of your desired results are generated by just 20% of your efforts.
Yes.
But it feels like most people spend 80% of their day agonizing over the trivial tasks that barely move the needle.
They do, because trivial tasks are safe. They don't trigger the amygdala's fear response. Redesigning a PowerPoint slide for the 4th time feels productive, but it is just friction.
Staying in the starting village.
Exactly. Writing the core proposal is the 20% that actually generates value, but it is terrifying, so you avoid it. To overcome this, we have to look at the mechanics of human habits.
Okay, let's talk habits.
You cannot rely on willpower to tackle the hardest task. You have to build a neurological habit loop.
I know the basic structure of the habit loop from the text. It's 4 parts: the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. Can we walk through how that actually plays out in a moment of distraction?
Certainly. Imagine you are sitting at your desk trying to do deep work. The cue is your phone buzzing on the table.
Okay, cue.
The craving is the sudden, intense desire for a hit of dopamine, a desire to relieve the mental strain of the hard work.
Right, I want an escape.
The response is the physical action of picking up the phone and opening a social media app. And the reward is the momentary distraction and the tiny chemical hit of seeing a notification.
So the loop is complete.
To build productive habits, you cannot just try to suppress the craving. You have to actively hijack this loop.
And one of the most brilliant ways the sources suggest doing this is a technique called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling is fascinating.
Explain how that works.
Temptation bundling is about pairing an activity you need to do with an activity you deeply want to do. You essentially use your brain's craving for dopamine as a tow rope to pull you through the friction of the difficult task.
Give me a practical example of how someone would use that.
Let's say you have a favorite audio show that you absolutely love listening to. You make a strict rule for yourself. You are only allowed to listen to that specific show while you are engaged in focused work, or, say, while you are at the gym.
Oh, I see.
If you want the reward, the entertainment, you have to endure the response of doing the work. You link the dopamine hit directly to the difficult task, thereby rewiring the habit loop to serve your goals rather than sabotage them.
It's like tricking a dog to take medicine by hiding the pill inside a piece of cheese.
That's a perfect analogy.
You're hiding the friction of the deep work inside the dopamine of the reward. Okay, let's look at the bigger picture.
We've covered a lot of internal ground.
We have. We've tackled the internal software. We understand the hedonic thermostat, the growth mindset, lateral creativity, and the mechanics of deep work. But if we apply all of this simply to get a 5% raise at a job we hate, we are just running faster on the same treadmill.
We are just optimizing the rat race.
Right. We need to talk about the currency of freedom. We need to rethink money and wealth.
The transition from productivity to wealth generation requires a fundamental redefining of what wealth actually is.
How so?
In the rat race, wealth is defined by status symbols. It is the new car that triggers the hedonic adaptation. It is buying expensive things to signal your success to people whose opinions shouldn't matter to you.
Buying things we don't need to impress people we don't like.
Exactly. But true wealth has nothing to do with material accumulation. True wealth is simply a purchase of freedom.
The purchase of freedom.
It is the ability to exert absolute control over your own time and your own choices.
That brings up one of the most powerful analogies in the entire stack of research we reviewed. It compares our financial lives to a game of Monopoly.
The Monopoly analogy is eye-opening.
It really is. If you sit down to play Monopoly, the rules are clear. You roll the dice, you move your piece around the board, and every time you pass go, you collect your $200 salary.
Right, that's your paycheck.
As you walk around the board, you inevitably land on spaces owned by other people, and you have to pay them rent. You might get hit with a random tax or go to jail. But imagine playing that game where you just keep walking in circles, collecting your $200, paying rent to everyone else, and you never purchase a single property.
You never buy anything that makes you money.
You never build a house or a hotel.
It is a profoundly depressing image, but it is precisely how the vast majority of the population interacts with the economy.
It's so true.
They collect a salary, they pay their landlord, they pay the grocery store, they pay the utility companies, and they desperately hope they don't land on a space with a massive medical bill or a car repair.
Just trying to survive the lap around the board.
They are playing the game purely as a consumer, never as an owner. And it is mathematically impossible to win the game of Monopoly or the game of financial freedom if you do not acquire assets.
And the word asset gets thrown around in complex financial jargon, but the sources we are looking at distill it down to a brutally simple binary definition.
It is remarkably simple.
Forget about depreciation schedules and tax codes for a minute. An asset is simply something that puts money into your pocket regardless of whether you are actively working, sleeping, or on vacation.
And a liability.
A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
It is the difference between a system that generates energy and a system that consumes it.
Right. But this simple definition deeply challenges conventional wisdom, which is why people push back on it so aggressively.
People get very defensive about this.
Let's do that right now. Let's push back. The biggest piece of conventional wisdom is that your house, the house you live in, is your greatest asset. But under this specific definition, a primary residence is a liability, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Because it's taking money out of your pocket every single month for the mortgage, the property taxes, the maintenance, the insurance. It does not put cash into your bank account while you sleep.
Precisely. Now, this does not mean buying a house is a morally bad decision or that it won't appreciate in value over 30 years. But from a pure cash flow perspective, on a month-to-month basis, it is a liability.
It consumes energy.
It increases the friction in your life because it requires you to maintain a certain level of active income just to sustain it.
So to escape the monopoly board loop, you must transition from being a collector of liabilities to a creator and owner of cash-flowing assets.
Yes, this could be intellectual property, a piece of software, a small business, or dividend-producing investments.
But creating an asset that actually works is incredibly hard. Most new businesses fail.
They do.
So the texts outline a framework called the Commandments of Value. If you are going to invest your deep work into building an asset, it must adhere to these 4 principles. The first is need.
Yes. You cannot base a business solely on what you are passionate about unless your passion solves a genuine problem for other people.
Ouch. That hurts the follow your passion crowd.
The market does not care about your desires. It cares about its own pain points. If your asset does not address a real, tangible need, it will fail.
Makes sense. The second commandment is entry. This is about the barrier to entry. If you decide to start a business that takes zero capital, zero specialized knowledge, and can be launched in 5 minutes, what happens?
You will immediately be drowned in an ocean of competition. If the barrier to entry is virtually non-existent, then millions of people will do it.
So you need a moat.
A true asset requires a moat. It requires the specialized, intense focus we discussed earlier to build something that cannot be easily replicated by a bored person with a laptop on a Sunday afternoon.
Right. The harder it is to start, the better. The third commandment is control. You have to maintain absolute authority over your resources and your distribution.
This is a big one today.
I see this constantly with creators or small businesses that build their entire audience on one specific social media platform. They think they have an asset, but they don't. They are sharecroppers.
Sharecroppers, exactly.
If the platform changes its algorithm tomorrow or decides to ban their account, their entire livelihood disappears overnight.
Yeah.
They have zero control.
They built a house on land they do not own. True wealth requires owning the foundational infrastructure of your income.
And the fourth commandment, which is the ultimate goal of this entire framework, is time. You must decouple your income from your physical time.
This goes back to the difference between capacity and leverage.
Okay, let's look at that.
If you are a brilliant lawyer who charges $1,000 an hour, you have high capacity, but you still have zero leverage.
Because you can only work so many hours.
Your wealth is strictly capped by the biological reality that there are only 24 hours in a day. If you get sick and cannot work, your income drops to zero.
That's terrifying, even at $1,000 an hour.
Exactly. An asset must be scalable. A piece of software can be sold to one person or 1 million people with almost no additional expenditure of your time. That is true leverage.
But adopting this mindset requires a massive psychological shift away from the scarcity mindset of the rat race.
It does. In the corporate hierarchy, wealth is viewed as a finite pie.
Like if your colleague gets a promotion, that means there is less opportunity for you. It fosters intense, bitter competition and jealousy.
But the reality of creating assets is rooted in an abundance mindset. You aren't fighting over scraps of a pre-existing pie. You are baking entirely new pies.
I like that. Baking new pies. You are generating novel value that did not exist before. It shifts your posture from hostility to creation.
Which serves as the perfect bridge to the final major pillar of our exploration.
Right, because we don't live on islands.
We have discussed optimizing the individual mind, mastering productivity, and building financial systems. But none of these things exist in a vacuum. Everything you build must interact with other human beings.
This brings us to the profound mechanics of human connection, communication, and health.
The foundation of it all.
I want to start this section with a concept from the text that totally blew my mind regarding the sheer power of speech. We often fall into the trap of thinking we are totally insignificant. You look at the news, you see there are billions of people on the planet, and you think, I am just a speck of dust. What does it matter what I say or do today?
It's easy to feel small.
But the text lays out the mathematics of social networks. Over the course of your life, you will get to know, reasonably well, about 1,000 people.
And each of those 1,000 people also knows 1,000 people.
Which means you are only one single handshake, one step away from 1 million people, and you are only 2 steps away from 1 billion people.
2 steps from 1 billion. When you conceptualize your social reality through the lens of network theory, the power of your words becomes almost terrifying.
It really does.
You are not an isolated node. You are a transmitter in a highly conductive web. Your mood, your integrity, your hostility, or your encouragement propagates through that network exponentially.
This is why mastering communication is not just a soft skill. It is a fundamental requirement for navigating reality.
Absolutely.
And the place where communication usually breaks down and causes the most friction is in difficult conversations.
Oh, yes. The hardest part of interacting.
The sources provide a masterful breakdown of the hidden architecture behind every tough conversation, whether it's asking for a raise or fighting with your spouse about doing the dishes. They argue that we think we are having one conversation, but there are actually 3 distinct layers operating simultaneously. Let's unpack those.
The first layer is the what happened conversation. This is the surface level. It is the battle over the timeline, the facts, who said what, and who is to blame.
The fatal trap at this layer is the assumption that our own perspective is the objective truth.
Exactly.
Right. I know exactly what happened, and if you disagree with me, you're either stupid or you're lying.
Precisely. But human memory and perception are highly flawed and subjective. We are arguing over facts that are deeply colored by our own biases.
So true.
But the real volatility comes from the second layer, the identity conversation. This layer is almost entirely internal and unspoken.
This is where the ego gets involved.
Yeah.
While we are supposedly arguing about a missed deadline at work, internally, my brain is panicking.
What's the brain saying?
I am asking myself, does missing this deadline mean I am incompetent? Does it mean I am a bad employee? If I am a bad employee, will I be fired? Will I lose my house? The stakes escalate from a simple mistake to a full-blown existential crisis.
And because your identity feels like it is under attack, you become fiercely defensive.
I'm defending my life, basically.
You cannot admit fault regarding the deadline because admitting fault feels like admitting you are a flawed human being. To navigate this, to remove the friction, we must elevate the dialogue to the third layer, the learning conversation.
How does that look in practice? How do you switch gears from defensive panic to learning?
You have to act as a mediator in your own dispute. Instead of acting as an opposing lawyer trying to prosecute the other person and assign blame, you shift your posture to that of an explorer trying to map the terrain.
Okay, so less fighting, more mapping.
You move away from the binary of, I am right and you are wrong. The phrasing shifts to, this is the situation as I currently perceive it based on my data. Please help me understand how you perceive it based on yours. You decouple your identity from the conflict.
To build a foundation for that kind of healthy detachment, the sources share 4 transformative rules for life. They are often referred to as agreements you make with yourself.
These are essential.
They are anonymous in our discussion, but they are incredibly powerful tools for reducing social friction. The first rule is, be impeccable with your word.
This goes back to the network theory. Speak with absolute integrity. Do not gossip. Do not use words to tear others down, because the negativity you broadcast will echo back through the network.
The second rule is arguably the most difficult. Don't take anything personally.
Oh, that is so hard to do.
That is so hard to do when someone is actively insulting you. But the logic is that what other people say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own internal identity crisis.
Right.
If someone yells at you in traffic, it isn't about you, it's about their own profound unhappiness. If you internalize it, you are voluntarily taking on their poison.
The third rule is, don't make assumptions. Human beings abhor a vacuum of information.
We really do. We fill in the blanks.
If a friend doesn't text us back for 2 days, we don't just assume they are busy. We invent elaborate catastrophic narratives about how they secretly hate us, and we analyze every past interaction for proof.
I've definitely done that.
We cause ourselves immense psychological suffering based entirely on fiction. The solution is simple, but requires courage. Communicate clearly and ask questions.
And the fourth rule is, always do your best.
But with the crucial caveat that your best is a fluid metric.
Right. Your best on a day when you have slept 8 hours and feel healthy is going to look vastly different than your best on a day when you are fighting a fever and dealing with a family crisis.
Exactly. Doing your best means operating at the maximum capacity of your current state without judging yourself against an idealized baseline.
If you apply these 4 rules, the friction in your relationships decreases dramatically. You stop wasting cognitive energy on petty conflicts.
But we must address the ultimate non-negotiable foundation of all of this. Health. All the intense productivity, the lateral creativity, the wealth creation, the brilliant communication, it means absolutely nothing if the physical vessel housing your brain collapses. Health is the foundational asset.
Totally. You can build the most incredible bimodal deep work schedule, and you can amass a fortune in cash-flowing assets, but if you are lying in a hospital bed with failing organs, you suddenly only have one goal in life, to get out of that hospital bed. Everything else vanishes.
Health must be viewed multidimensionally. It is physical, it is mental, and it is social. And just as we discussed the mechanisms of success, the sources warn against a subconscious mechanism that tears us down.
They use the acronym FAILURE to describe these deeply destructive psychological states that operate like viruses in the system. Let's analyze those states, because recognizing them is the first step to neutralizing them.
The F is for frustration.
Right. This isn't just being annoyed. It's the toxic habit of letting temporary setbacks dictate your permanent emotional state. It's the friction of resisting reality.
The A is for aggressiveness, but specifically the negative kind. Not determination or drive, but hostility and lashing out at others because you feel entirely out of control of your own life.
I is for insecurity. This is the voice of the fixed mindset we discussed at the very beginning. It is the internal block whispering that you aren't good enough, actively preventing you from attempting anything meaningful.
L is for loneliness. This is the danger of isolating yourself in pursuit of your goals, forgetting that we are fundamentally social creatures who require connection to that network of 1 billion people to maintain our sanity.
And E is for emptiness. Let's talk about emptiness.
This one is serious.
The text describes it as a profound state of discouragement, where life literally loses its flavor. It is the feeling of being totally disconnected from any sense of purpose. It's not just sadness, it's a void.
It is a critical state of system failure.
I have a serious pushback here. A reality check.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a listener is hearing this right now, and they are deep in that dark, heavy feeling of clinical emptiness, how do they navigate that? You cannot just tell someone in a depressive void to use the journalistic focus philosophy or stop making assumptions.
No, you can't.
You can't just slap a bimodal productivity schedule on emptiness. It feels a bit like telling someone with 2 broken legs to just adopt a growth mindset and sprint faster.
That is a deeply compassionate and absolutely vital pushback. You cannot productivity hack your way out of spiritual or emotional emptiness.
So what do you do?
The frameworks we discussed, deep work, asset generation, are engines. But emptiness means the fuel tank is completely dry. The texts acknowledge this limitation. They emphasize that the way out of the void does not begin with action. It begins with radical acceptance.
Acceptance of what?
Acceptance of the tragedies, the unfairness, and the pain of life, without letting those things permanently define your identity.
That's a tall order.
Emptiness often arises from an inability to let go of a profound attachment to past grievances, or a paralyzing fear of a disastrous future. Your mind is stretched between a past you cannot change and a future you cannot control, leaving no energy for the present.
So what's the antidote?
The antidote provided by the research is an intense, deliberate focus purely on the immediate present moment.
So if you are in the void, you don't try to fix your entire life. You don't try to build an asset or solve your career crisis.
No, you just focus on the physical sensation of the breath you are taking right now. You focus on the sensory experience of the chair you are sitting in. You rebuild your connection to reality one tiny, manageable, present moment at a time.
Just breathing. Just existing.
You have to put down the heavy sacks of the past and the future just to have the strength to stand up in the present. It requires letting go of the ego's furious demand that the world be different than it currently is.
And then what?
Once you stabilize in the present, then, and only then, can you begin to slowly apply the tools of growth.
You drop the baggage so you can walk again. That is a powerful distinction. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have.
Let's pull all these disparate threads together and synthesize the journey we've mapped out. You started this morning hitting snooze, trapped in a cycle of reactive living, dreading the rat race, running endlessly on a treadmill while the scenery never changed because your hedonic thermostat kept demanding more.
But by recognizing that biological trap, you take the first step off the treadmill. You consciously shift your mindset from fixed to growth, treating your current state, no matter how frustrating, as merely the starting coordinates on a map, not a permanent identity.
Right. And then instead of trying to brute force your way out of the rut with an exhausted brain, you disrupt your cognitive loops. You adopt the Martian perspective. You use bizarre sensory inputs, smelling that cinnamon, swaying back and forth to bypass your panic response and force new lateral ideas to the surface.
Once you secure those ideas, you protect them fiercely. You refuse to let your attention be fractured by continuous partial attention.
You ruthlessly eliminate shallow work where possible.
And you utilize a philosophy of focus, whether bimodal or rhythmic, to dedicate intense concentration to the 20% of actions that actually generate value.
You stop playing Monopoly like a victim, walking around the board and handing your money to everyone else. You start building asset systems that decouple your time from your income.
And, crucially, you navigate the massive network of humanity by speaking truthfully, refusing to take the hostility of others personally, and protecting your physical and mental health above all else.
You stop being a passive consumer of your circumstances. You take the pen back. You start writing your own life.
It is a remarkable structural transformation when these components are linked together and put into practice, and it brings us to a broader philosophical reflection on the true nature of human potential.
Let's hear it.
Very often in our society, we define potential as raw capacity. We measure how smart you are, how many hours you can work, how much data you can process. But true human potential isn't really about capacity at all. It is about alignment.
Alignment. Tell me more about that.
Think of an engine. If the gears are misaligned, it doesn't matter how much raw horsepower the engine has. It will just grind itself to pieces and produce nothing but heat and friction.
It destroys itself.
But when the gears are perfectly aligned, the engine runs silently and transfers power effortlessly. When your daily, seemingly mundane habits, your focus, your financial decisions, your communication align with your deepest, most authentic values, the friction of the rat race disappears.
Wow.
You cease to be a victim of your environment, and you become the architect of your reality. You don't necessarily have to work harder. You are just finally moving in the exact direction you were built to go.
Alignment over capacity. It changes the entire paradigm, from burning energy to channeling it. As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought to mull over today. We talked about the mathematics of connection. You are only 2 handshakes, 2 connections away from a billion people. Every word you speak, every action you take, every mindset you adopt ripples through that network with terrifying speed.
The question is not whether you are broadcasting. You are always broadcasting. The question is the nature of the signal.
Exactly. So if you are truly only 2 handshakes away from a billion people, what is the exact message your daily actions are broadcasting to the world right now?
Are your actions broadcasting fear, self-sabotage, and compliance to the friction of the rat race?
Or are your actions broadcasting the quiet, relentless blueprint of an architect building something entirely new?
A profound question to carry with you into the rest of the day.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. We wish you immense clarity, alignment, and unshakable purpose until our next conversation.